Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Science Channel. Tonight, we'll be exploring something that appears simple, yet is surprisingly complex beneath the surface. It starts out as milk and embarks on a journey of transformation to become far more fascinating. This is a world shaped by time, by unseen life, and by small decisions that ripple outward into surprising results. Cheese may seem familiar at first glance, yet beneath that surface lies a story of transformation, of patience, and of discovery that stretches back through thousands of years. Across cultures and landscapes, people have learned to guide this process in their own way. They have listened, adjusted, and refined. From cool mountain caves to warm kitchen tables, each creation carries a trace of its origin. What emerges is not just food, but a record of place, of history, and of human curiosity at work. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, there is nothing you need to do but relax. Allow your shoulders to soften. Allow your breathing to slow. And as your mind begins to loosen its grip on the day, join me as we move through this rich and fascinating world together. Let's begin. Cheese is milk transformed by microbes, time, and astonishing chemistry. At first, that sounds almost too simple. Milk seems fleeting and fragile, something that spoils quickly and asks to be used at once. Yet with the right touch, it becomes something firm, fragrant, and capable of lasting for months or even years. That change depends on invisible workers. Bacteria begin reshaping sugars into acid. Enzymes gather loose proteins into curds. Salt steps in to guide moisture and flavor. Then time does what no human hand can do alone. It deepens, sharpens, softens, or sweetens the result depending on how the process is guided. A liquid from the morning can become a creamy brie, a springy mozzarella, or a crumbly cheddar with an entirely different character. Few foods reveal transformation so clearly. It is not just preservation. It is a controlled remaking of matter, where biology, patience, and craft turn something ordinary into one of the most varied foods on Earth. Some cheeses are alive with millions of helpful bacteria. That means a piece on your board is not always a finished object. In many cases, it is an active community still changing as it breathes, ripens, and develops flavor. These bacteria are not unwanted intruders. They are invited participants that help shape texture, aroma, and taste from the very beginning. Some make lactic acid, which helps curds form and keeps harmful microbes in check. Others work later, breaking down proteins and fats into deeper flavors that can seem buttery, nutty, tangy, or savory. In washed rind cheeses, surface bacteria help create strong aromas and soft interiors. In aged varieties, entire populations rise and fall as conditions shift. So when someone says cheese is alive, that is not just poetic language. It can be biologically true. A wheel in a cellar may still be undergoing tiny changes every day. Even after it is cut, that hidden world has already helped write the flavor story you taste. The world's oldest cheeses survived for thousands of years in tombs. That discovery feels almost impossible at first. Cheese seems perishable, intimate, and tied to the table, not something that could wait in darkness for centuries beyond counting. Yet archaeologists have uncovered ancient remains in burial sites that preserve traces of early cheesemaking across vast stretches of time. In parts of Asia, dry and unusual conditions helped fragile organic material endure long enough for modern science to examine it. What survived was not a fresh and edible meal, of course, but evidence of a process already familiar to ancient people. That matters because it shows cheesemaking was not a late luxury or a refined afterthought. It was already part of human ingenuity in deep antiquity. Long before refrigeration, long before industrial food, people had learned how to reshape milk into something more stable and useful. A tomb can preserve more than bones and ornaments. Sometimes it keeps proof that our ancestors were already experimenting with food in ways that still fill our kitchens today. A wheel of Parmigiano Reggiano can age longer than many pets live. That span of time changes how you think about cheese. This is not something rushed from milk to market in a hurried week. A great wheel may sit for years while moisture slowly leaves, flavors concentrate, and the interior grows more complex with every passing season. During that long wait, enzymes keep working. Proteins break into smaller pieces that deepen savoriness and create that remarkable granular texture. Fats shift as well, adding notes that can suggest broth, roasted nuts, or fruit. Makers do not simply forget these wheels and hope for the best. They monitor them, turn them, brush them, and inspect them with serious care. The result is food that carries the memory of patience in every shard. When you snap off a piece and hear that faint crystalline crunch, you are tasting time made solid. Few foods ask for such a long act of trust, and fewer still reward it with such concentrated depth and character. Blue cheese gets its veins from carefully cultivated edible mold. That striking marbled pattern is not a flaw and not an accident. It is the visible trace of a fungus that cheesemakers intentionally guide into the wheel. Once inside, it spreads through small openings where oxygen can reach it, creating the blue or green lines that make these cheeses so recognizable. What sounds alarming at first is actually one of the great examples of humans learning to work with the microbial world rather than fearing it. The mold does more than color the paste. It transforms flavor in dramatic ways, breaking down fats and proteins into notes that can seem peppery, earthy, mushroomy, or even faintly sweet depending on the style. Roquefort, Stilton, and Gorgonzola all show how different that transformation can become. The wonder is not only that mold can be edible, it is that under careful control, it can be delicious, elegant, and astonishingly varied. A blue vein is really a map of life at work inside cheese. Swiss cheese holes begin with bacteria releasing tiny bursts of gas. Those round openings, which seem almost cartoonish, come from a quiet biological event hidden inside the wheel. As certain bacteria feed on compounds produced during fermentation, they release carbon dioxide. That gas needs somewhere to go, so it gathers in small pockets as the cheese matures. It is a beautiful reminder that even a familiar visual joke has a real and delicate cause behind it. Size and number depend on temperature, timing, and the behavior of the microbes involved. If conditions shift, the pattern shifts too. In fact, modern farming and cleaner milking practices changed the dust and stray particles that once helped gas bubbles form, and some cheeses began developing fewer holes than before. So the classic look of Swiss cheese is not fixed forever. It depends on an entire chain of events that begins long before aging, with living organisms quietly producing shape from within. One tiny recipe change can turn the same milk into wildly different cheeses. That is one of the deepest wonders of cheesemaking. The starting ingredient may be nearly identical, yet the ending can feel as though it belongs to an entirely different universe of food. Change the starter culture, and the flavor path begins to bend. Cut the curds smaller, and more moisture escapes, leading toward a firmer result. Heat them differently, stir them longer, press them harder, salt them sooner, or age them under other conditions, and the character keeps changing. With one set of choices, you may end up with a supple melting cheese. With another, you make it something crumbly, sharp, and built for long aging. That means cheese is not one invention, but an immense branching tree of decisions. The maker is constantly steering a living process through countless small acts. What seems minor in the moment can echo all the way into the final bite. In cheese, detail is destiny, and tiny choices can create worlds apart. Some cheeses are washed in beer, wine, or even brandy. That practice sounds extravagant, though it began as a practical way of managing the rind during aging. When cheesemakers wash the surface with liquid, they encourage certain microbes that thrive in damp, salty conditions. Those microbes help create sticky orange or reddish rinds, and often produce aromas that are far stronger than the taste itself. Beer can lend malty depth. Wine can support fruitier or more tannic impressions. Stronger spirits have also been used in some traditions, adding another layer of local identity to the cheese. Yet the wash is not simply poured on for flavor like a sauce. It is part of ripening. It shapes the ecology of the rind, which then influences texture and aroma from the outside inward. The result can be startling, especially to someone meeting these cheeses for the first time. They may smell fierce, almost unruly, then taste rich, meaty, and surprisingly rounded. A simple wash can turn the rind into a whole separate craft. Humans were making cheese before writing was invented. That fact places cheese in an extraordinary part of human history. It belongs to a world before books, before records, before recipes written down for future generations. Its earliest makers had no manuals. They learned by handling milk, observing change, and passing knowledge from person to person through memory and practice. That means cheesemaking is older than many of the systems we use to track civilization itself. It emerged in communities that had already begun managing animals and needed ways to preserve valuable nutrients beyond the day of milking. In that sense, cheese is one of humanity's oldest food technologies. It represents experimentation without laboratories and discovery without formal science, though real science was happening all the same. Proteins coagulated, acids rose, microbes acted. People noticed patterns and repeated what worked. The result was durable nourishment and, over time, astonishing variety. Before history was written in symbols, some of it was already being written in curds, salt, and time. The holes in Emmental shrank when modern barns became too clean. That sounds almost backwards, though it reveals how sensitive cheese can be to the tiniest parts of farm life. For a long time, traditional Emmental often developed large round holes because microscopic particles from hay found their way into the milk and helped gas bubbles begin forming during aging. Then dairy hygiene improved. Milking systems became cleaner, barns became less dusty, and fewer of those particles entered the process. The result was unexpected. Some cheeses began developing smaller holes, or fewer holes at all. In other words, modern cleanliness quietly changed the face of Swiss-style cheese. That is a wonderful reminder that food is shaped not only by major ingredients and famous techniques, but also by the hidden details of an agricultural world. A speck of hay can influence geometry. A cleaner barn can alter tradition. The famous eyes in Emmental are not just decoration. They are a record of microbes, farming, and the strange consequences of progress. Mimolette can be aged with tiny mites working on the rind. That fact tends to stop people in their tracks. The idea sounds unsettling until you realize it belongs to a long history of humans letting other creatures help shape food in carefully managed ways. During aging, microscopic cheese mites can live on the surface of mimolette and nibble at the rind. Their activity roughens the exterior and helps create that distinctive cratered appearance, almost like the surface of a tiny orange moon. What matters is not only the look. Their work also affects how the rind breathes and how the cheese develops over time. contributing to a texture and flavor profile that becomes more concentrated and nutty as aging continues. It is one of the most vivid examples of cheesemaking as shared labor between people and other living beings. A wheel of mimolette does not become itself through human intention alone. Part of its identity is etched by minute animals, moving patiently across the rind in numbers too small to see at first glance. Kaju marzu became famous for taking cheese fermentation to extremes. Few cheeses have attracted as much fascination, shock, and argument as this Sardinian specialty. It begins from a more familiar sheep milk cheese, then passes into a stage where cheese flies lay eggs and the hatched larvae help break the paste down far beyond ordinary ripening. The result is a texture so soft and transformed that it sits at the very edge of what many people are willing to call cheese at all. That boundary is precisely what made it famous. Kaju marzu became a symbol of how far traditional food practices can go when local custom and microbial or insect activity are allowed to push beyond modern comfort. For some, it represents heritage and daring. For others, it represents a line that should not be crossed. Either way, it is unforgettable. This is not everyday cheesemaking. It is fermentation taken to a point where food becomes a cultural argument about disgust, bravery, identity, and the astonishing range of human taste. Cabrales ages in mountain caves and can taste gloriously wild. This blue cheese carries the drama of its setting right into the mouth. Made in Asturias in northern Spain, it is matured in cool, natural caves high in the mountains, where damp air and cave flora help guide its development. By the time it is ready, the cheese can deliver a flavor that feels expansive and untamed, with deep blue intensity, mineral sharpness, and a forceful animal richness that refuses to be ignored. Yet wildness here does not mean disorder. It means character that feels shaped by rugged conditions rather than softened for broad approval. Cabrales tastes like a cheese that remembers cliffs, mist, and stone. That impression is part of why it stays with people so powerfully. It does not merely offer salt and pungency. It offers a sense of place so strong that it can feel almost theatrical. Some cheeses comfort. This one storms in, throws open the window, and lets the mountain air rush straight through. Taleggio smells fierce, yet tastes surprisingly gentle and buttery. That contrast is one of the great delights of washed rind cheese. The aroma rises first, strong enough to make a newcomer brace for an overwhelming bite. Then the taste arrives, and instead of aggression, you find softness, cream, and a mellow richness that can seem almost tender. Taleggio has a supple interior and a thin washed rind that helps create its notorious smell, though the flavor itself is often far more restrained than its reputation suggests. There may be hints of fruit, nuts, or earth, but the overall impression is often smooth and rounded rather than punishing. This gap between expectation and reality gives the cheese a kind of charm. It teaches people that aroma is only one chapter of the story. The nose may shout while the palate speaks in a lower voice. Taleggio feels almost like a trickster in the cheese world, dramatic at the threshold and unexpectedly welcoming once you step inside. Epoisses was once reportedly banned from parts of public transport. Whether every telling of that story is perfectly documented or not, the legend fits the cheese so well that it has become part of its aura. Epoisses is a famously pungent washed rind cheese from Burgundy, often matured with repeated washings that help create a sticky orange exterior and an aroma powerful enough to dominate a room. Tales of it being unwelcome on trains have endured because people instantly believe them. It seems like the sort of cheese that could challenge the social contract of shared air. Yet this reputation is part of its magic. Beneath the formidable smell lies an interior that can become lush, spoonable, and intensely rich, with savory depth rather than mere harshness. Epoisses thrives in that space where food becomes story, it is not just eaten. It is whispered about, warned about, dared, and remembered. Few cheeses command attention so completely that even their rumored travel restrictions become part of their legend. Raclette was made to be melted and scraped in golden sheets. This cheese was built for a very specific pleasure. Traditionally, a wheel or half-wheel is warmed near heat until the exposed surface softens and begins to blister slightly. Then that molten layer is scraped away onto waiting food in a glossy ribbon. The whole ritual gives raclette its name and much of its charm. It is not simply cheese used in cooking. It is cheese designed for a moment of transformation at the table. The texture becomes flowing without losing all body, and the flavor turns nutty, savory, and deeply comforting as warmth unlocks it. What makes raclette so memorable is that the act of serving becomes part of the experience. You see the surface change. You wait for the right moment. Then the knife moves, and the cheese falls away in a rich golden sheet. It feels generous, theatrical, and ancient all at once, like a winter custom that understands exactly what melted cheese can do to human happiness. Cheese can be soft as custard or hard as stone. Few foods stretch across such a dramatic range of texture. At one end, you have cheeses that barely hold their shape. They slump, ooze, and spread with the lightest touch. At the other, there are wheels so firm they must be broken into shards or grated into snow. That enormous difference comes from how much moisture remains, how the curds were handled, how long the cheese aged, and what kind of ripening took place along the way. A spoon may be the right tool for one cheese, while a knife struggles with another. Texture changes not only how cheese feels, but how it tastes. A creamy interior releases flavor differently from a dry, crystalline one. That is why two cheeses can share milk as a starting point and still seem almost unrelated when they reach the mouth. Cheese is not a single experience. It is a spectrum that runs from silk to stone, and each point along that spectrum reveals a different side of transformation. Rennet lets liquid milk become a solid curd in minutes. For most of human history, that shift must have felt like a kind of kitchen magic. A warm pot of milk looks smooth and unified. Then suddenly, it separates into soft white masses and pale greenish whey. The key is an enzyme that snips apart one of milk's stabilizing proteins. Once that support is removed, the protein network can gather and hold together instead of floating freely. What had seemed like one substance reveals that it was always a delicate structure waiting to change. Traditional rennet often came from the stomachs of young ruminants, which made sense long before anyone understood the chemistry. Today it can also come from plants or microbial sources. Yet the wonder remains the same. A maker adds a tiny amount, waits, and watches a threshold being crossed. Without that moment, many classic cheeses could never begin. It is one of the clearest examples of how a microscopic action can reshape an entire food. Fresh mozzarella is stretched while still warm and springy. That stage gives it a character unlike almost any other cheese. After the curd has acidified to the right point, it is exposed to hot water and worked until it becomes smooth, glossy, and elastic. Instead of crumbling or breaking, it begins to pull and fold like a living ribbon. The cheesemaker stretches, gathers, and shapes it while it is still supple, and timing matters enormously. Too soon, and it resists. Too late, and the texture loses that tender bounce people love. This process creates the delicate layers that help it tear into moist strands when opened. It also explains why fresh versions feel so different from firmer aged cheeses. One invites slicing, while the other almost seems to yield on its own. There is something deeply satisfying about the transformation because it turns curd into motion. You can almost see the structure reorganizing under warm hands, becoming satin-like, milky, and unmistakably alive. Cheddar gains its texture through a real process called cheddaring. That name sounds quaint, though the method behind it is wonderfully physical. After curds form and much of the whey is drained away, they are cut into slabs, stacked, turned, and allowed to knit together under their own weight. As this continues, more moisture leaves, and the structure becomes denser and more orderly. The curd changes from loose pieces into something layered and substantial, almost like a food, learning how to become itself. Then those slabs are milled into smaller pieces, salted and pressed. This sequence helps create the firm body and sliceable character that people recognize at once. It also gives cheddar its own path, apart from other hard cheeses that reach firmness in different ways. The beauty of the process is that it sounds almost repetitive, yet each turn matters. Weight, time, acidity, and handling all push the curd toward a very specific future. Texture here is not accidental. It is built through deliberate choreography. Brie ripens from the outside inward like a slow, creamy tide. That means the edge and the center are living on different schedules. The white rind on the surface is not a wrapper, but an active participant in ripening. As the cheese ages, microbes on that outer layer begin changing the chemistry nearby, softening the paste, and creating the velvety texture people associate with a ripe wedge. Closer to the middle, the process takes longer, so a younger example may show a firmer, chalky core surrounded by a softer ring. With more time, that creamy zone moves deeper until the whole interior becomes lush and flowing. It is a beautiful kind of progress because you can almost read it in cross-section. The cheese tells you where the transformation has reached. This also explains why ripeness matters so much with brie. The same wheel can offer very different experiences depending on timing. One stage feels fresh and restrained. Another becomes rich, mushroomy, and almost luxuriously soft on the tongue. Camembert transformed from farmhouse food into a national symbol of France. That rise tells a larger story about how a local cheese can become part of a country's identity. It began as a regional product with roots in Normandy, made in a practical rural tradition rather than in some grand palace kitchen. Over time, its reputation expanded far beyond the village world that shaped it. Improvements in transport helped it travel. Repeated stories about origin and authenticity helped it gather prestige. Packaging mattered too. The small wooden box made it easier to protect and ship, and it also gave the cheese a recognizable visual presence. Soon it was not just something to eat, but something to represent Frenchness itself, especially in the minds of people looking for foods that seemed tied to land and heritage. That transformation is fascinating because the cheese did not change only on the palate. It changed in the imagination. A once local product came to carry ideas about nation, tradition, and cultural pride far beyond the farm. Roquefort must age in natural caves filled with specific mold. That requirement makes it feel less like a generic product and more like a partnership with a particular landscape. The famous caves of Roquefort-sur-Sauzon provide cool, humid conditions that have guided the cheese for generations. Air moves through natural fissures in the rock, creating an environment that supports the ripening process in a very distinctive way. The mold involved, Penicillium roqueforti, is not treated as an incidental presence. It is central to the character of the cheese, and part of what gives Roquefort its authority in the world of blues. The milk is sheep milk, which adds its own richness and tang. Then the interior develops those striking veins and sharp mineral depth during maturation. What makes this so compelling is the sense that place is not just a label on the rind. The cave itself helps complete the cheese. Remove that setting and you may still make blue cheese, but you would no longer be making this one. Stilton cannot legally be made in the village called Stilton. That sounds like a joke, though it is one of the strangest truths in food lore. The cheese took its famous name from a village that became associated with its sale and reputation, not from the place where the protected product is now allowed to be made. Today, true Stilton must come from specific counties in England and follow defined rules. The village of Stilton lies outside that protected zone, which means a cheesemaker there cannot legally produce a cheese and sell it under the name the village helped make famous. It is a wonderful example of how food names become tangled with trade, geography, and history. People often assume a named cheese must come from the place named on the label. In this case, the story took a more complicated route. The name stuck. The law hardened around later definitions, and the map ended up holding a delicious little paradox that still surprises almost everyone who hears it. Feta became so contested, it helped define food law in Europe. This was not just an argument about taste. It became a major legal struggle over who could use a famous name and what that name really meant. For years, producers in different countries made white-brined cheeses and sold them under the same label, often in very large quantities. Greece argued that the name belonged to a specific tradition rooted in local practice, sheep and goat milk, and a long cultural history. Others saw it as a more general category that had spread far beyond one homeland. The dispute moved through European institutions and became a test case for protected food names. In the end, the ruling backed the Greek claim within the European Union, which gave the cheese a strong legal identity tied to origin and method. That matters far beyond one salty block on a plate. It shows that food can carry memory, economics, and national pride so powerfully that courts must decide where culture ends and commerce begins. Parmigiano Reggiano is checked by experts using tiny silver hammers. That image feels almost ceremonial, and in a way it is. After long aging, wheels are examined by trained inspectors who tap the rind and listen closely for clues hidden inside. A practiced ear can detect faults in structure, such as cracks or voids, without cutting the cheese open. The hammer is small, though the knowledge behind it is immense. This is quality control carried out through sound, touch, and experience, rather than through a machine alone. It reminds you that some traditional foods are still judged with senses honed over years of repetition. The wheel is not merely weighed or labeled, it is interrogated. It must prove that the slow months of aging produced the texture and integrity expected of it. There is something beautiful in that moment. A Greek cheese is not only made, it is listened to. The final verdict comes from a brief ringing tap that turns hidden structure into audible truth for those who know how to hear it. Gruyere can develop crystals that crunch softly between your teeth. Those little bursts of texture can feel surprising at first, especially in a cheese known for smooth melting and deep savory flavor. People sometimes mistake them for flaws, though they are often signs that complex changes unfolded during aging. In many hard and semi-hard cheeses, certain amino acids can gather into tiny crystals as proteins break down over time. The result is a delicate crunch that contrasts beautifully with the surrounding paste. In Gruyere, that texture can appear alongside nutty richness and a long, rounded finish, making each bite more layered than it first seems. What is so captivating is that the crunch is not added from outside. It grows from the cheese's own internal evolution. Time builds it particle by particle. So a moment that might seem small becomes evidence of a hidden journey. When those crystals appear, they are not interrupting the experience. They are announcing that the cheese has been changing in patient, intricate ways. Cheese began as a way to preserve fragile milk much longer. Fresh milk is generous, though it is also terribly fleeting. In a warm world without refrigeration, it could sour or spoil before a family had time to use it all. Cheesemaking offered a brilliant answer. Instead of racing against the clock every day, people learned how to capture milk in a form that could travel, wait, and nourish them later. By removing water, adding salt, and encouraging helpful fermentation, they turned something delicate into something far more durable. That changed the meaning of dairying itself. Milk no longer belonged only to the morning it was drawn. It could become food for journeys, trade, lean seasons, and distant markets. This practical need helps explain why cheese became so widespread in so many cultures. It was not invented as a luxury. It was a survival tool that happened to become delicious. One of humanity's most beloved foods began as a clever way to stretch abundance beyond the day. Nomads may have discovered cheese by carrying milk in animal stomachs. Whether the story happened exactly this way or not, it captures something essential about early food discovery. Imagine people moving across long distances with milk stored in containers made from the bodies of animals they already depended on. Those stomach linings naturally contained enzymes that could encourage coagulation. Add warmth, motion, and time, and the milk might separate into curds and whey during the journey itself. Open the container later, and instead of one liquid, you find two new substances with different uses and different keeping qualities. It is easy to see why that image has endured for so long. It turns the origin of cheese into a moment of surprise on the move, born from necessity rather than from a formal plan. Even if the real beginnings were more gradual and varied, the tale reveals how closely early invention was tied to daily life. Discovery may have come not from a laboratory, but from travel, improvisation, and attention. Ancient pottery still holds fatty traces from early cheesemaking. That is one of the most beautiful things about archaeology. A broken vessel can preserve a whisper of a meal made thousands of years ago. Pottery absorbs tiny amounts of fat into its porous walls, and modern analysis can sometimes identify whether those residues came from meat, milk, or more specific dairy processing. In some cases, the evidence points not just to dairying in general, but to the making of cheese or other separated milk products. This matters because words cannot help us at such depths of time. There are no recipe books waiting in the ground from the earliest farmers. Instead, scientists read chemistry like a hidden archive. A fragment of clay becomes a witness. It can tell us that people were straining, heating, and transforming milk long before written descriptions survived. That is astonishing. The proof of early cheesemaking is not only tucked inside stories. It is sealed in the very fabric of ancient containers, waiting patiently to be noticed. Roman writers described cheesemaking with surprising detail and pride. By the Roman period, cheese was no longer just an unnamed rustic habit hiding in kitchens and farms. It had entered the written record with enough force that authors discussed how it was made, where it came from, and why certain regions did it especially well. Agricultural writers described methods and milk sources. Satirists and poets mentioned it as part of daily life. The result is a picture of cheese as both ordinary and esteemed, familiar enough for everyone to recognize, yet distinct enough for quality to matter. Rome did not merely consume cheese. It observed it, judged it, and folded it into a culture that cared deeply about production and trade. This written attention tells us something important. Once a food becomes worth describing in detail, it has moved beyond accident and into craft. Cheese had already become a subject of expertise. Even then, people were noticing differences of origin, handling, and reputation that still shape the cheese world now. Medieval monasteries helped preserve and refine many famous cheeses. Monasteries were places of prayer, though they were also centers of disciplined labor, record-keeping, and agricultural skill. That combination made them powerful guardians of food knowledge. Monks and nuns worked land, managed animals, and developed routines that could be repeated with care across seasons and generations. In a world where so much knowledge was vulnerable to disruption, that steadiness mattered. Cheesemaking benefited from it. A monastery could support dairying, maintain cellars, observe results, and refine methods over long periods of time. Some religious communities also needed nourishing foods that fit fasting rules or local conditions, which gave even more reason to perfect preserved dairy. The result was not a single monastic cheese tradition, but a wider pattern of careful attention that helped certain styles survive and improve. When people imagine monasteries, they often think of manuscripts. They should also think of wheels aging in cool rooms, carrying practical wisdom forward through centuries of change. Alpine cheeses were shaped by seasonal journeys into high mountain pastures. In many mountain regions, dairying followed the rhythm of elevation. As warmer months arrived, herders moved animals uphill to graze on rich summer pastures, then returned lower down when weather turned harsh again. This annual movement shaped the cheeses made there in very direct ways. Milk had to be handled far from permanent towns, often in remote huts where it was more practical to make large, durable wheels than fragile, fresh products. Those cheeses needed to keep well, travel back down the mountain, and store food from the brief abundance of summer into colder seasons. The pastures themselves also mattered, because high grazing lands could produce distinctive milk tied to altitude, plant life, and season. So these cheeses were born not only from flavor preferences, but from motion across a landscape. They are products of migration, geography, and timing. When you cut into an alpine wheel, you're tasting of food designed by mountains and by the yearly climb toward them. Some traditional cheeses exist because winters once made fresh milk impossible. For much of history, the year was not one continuous stream of equal abundance. Winter could break the flow of food in very harsh ways. Animals might give less milk, or families might not have easy access to it at all. That meant people had to think ahead during times of plenty. Cheesemaking became one of the smartest ways to do that. It allowed milk from more productive months to be converted into something that could last into the cold and hungry part of the year. In that sense, some classic cheeses are really answers to a seasonal problem. They exist because people needed protein and calories after the pasture faded and the air turned sharp. Their firmness, saltiness, and keeping qualities were not random traits. They were deeply practical responses to climate. So, when we meet an old regional cheese today, we are not just meeting flavor. We are meeting a strategy for surviving winter with foresight, skill, and stored nourishment. Trade routes helped spread both cheesemaking skills and starter cultures. When people picture trade, they often think of goods moving from one place to another. Yet knowledge travels too, and in cheesemaking, that can be just as important as any cargo. Merchants, migrants, shepherds, soldiers, and pilgrims all carried habits with them. They shared techniques for curdling milk, salting it, shaping it, aging it, and judging when it was ready. Over time, these encounters could nudge local traditions in new directions. Microbes may have traveled as well through tools, wooden vats, cloths, and repeated practice, helping certain fermentation communities become established in new places. That does not mean cheeses became uniform. Quite the opposite. Ideas moved, then changed when they met new animals, climates, and customs. Trade routes became threads in a vast living network of experimentation. A market road could carry more than food for sale. It could carry a method, a taste, or a microbial inheritance that quietly changed what a region made for generations afterward. Cheese became valuable enough to store, tax, and sometimes even insure. That tells you it had moved far beyond simple household use. Once cheese could be aged, transported, and sold across wider distances, it became an asset with real economic weight. Authorities noticed. Landlords noticed. Merchants noticed. In some places, cheese formed part of rents or dues. In others, it was counted as taxable produce because it held value in a way raw milk often could not. Larger wheels especially made sense in this system, since they concentrated labor and nutrients into forms that could be inventoried and traded. The very fact that some cheese could be insured is remarkable. Insurance is for things worth protecting from loss, theft, or damage. So a wheel in storage was not merely food awaiting supper. It could represent capital, reputation, and future income. That changes the image entirely. Cheese was not only a comfort on the table. In many settings, it was a serious economic object, woven into systems of property, risk, and exchange. Industrial cheesemaking changed flavor, scale, and consistency across the modern world. Once production moved into larger and more standardized systems, cheese entered a new chapter. Industrial methods made it possible to process enormous volumes of milk, reduce some of the unpredictability of small batch work, and deliver more uniform products to growing populations. That was a profound shift. Cheese no longer depended so heavily on one valley, one cellar, or one family's seasonal rhythm. It could be made at scale, shipped farther, and sold more reliably. For many people, that meant access and affordability improved dramatically. Yet something else changed as well. Standardization tends to favor consistency over variation, which can flatten some of the local quirks that once made cheeses deeply specific to place and maker. Flavor profiles narrowed in many cases. Textures became more repeatable. Modern cheese culture has been shaped by this tension ever since, between the efficiency of industry and the complexity of tradition. The cheese counter we know today exists because that transformation never stopped unfolding. Different animal milks create entirely different worlds of flavor. It is tempting to think of milk as a single starting point, as though one white liquid could stand in for all the rest. Cheese quickly proves otherwise. Milk from different animals carries its own balance of fat, protein, minerals, sugars, and aromatic compounds, and those differences shape everything that follows. The curd may set more firmly or more softly. The paste may become dense, silky, crumbly, or lush. Aromas can lean toward grass, nuts, flowers, butter, earth, or something far more animal and wild. That means a cheesemaker is never working with a blank canvas. The character of the milk is already present before the vat is even warmed. Cow, goat, sheep, buffalo, and rarer milks each open a different path. In some cases, the contrast is immediate. In others, it reveals itself slowly as the cheese ripens. One craft can produce many worlds because the first ingredient arrives carrying its own hidden personality and promise. Sheep milk often makes richer cheese than cow milk. You can feel that richness almost at once. It tends to bring a fuller body, a deeper sense of density, and a luxurious texture that can seem both concentrated and soft at the same time. One reason is simple abundance. Sheep milk usually contains more solids than cow milk, which means more of what becomes cheese is already present in the pail. That gives makers a powerful starting material for styles that feel substantial, savory, and deeply satisfying. It also helps explain why famous sheep milk cheeses often seem to carry such intensity. They can be creamy without being bland, and sharp without losing their sense of fullness. There is often a warm, almost lanolin edge as well, a flavor signature that makes them distinct rather than merely heavier. In regions where sheep thrive on rough pasture and difficult terrain, this milk has long been a treasure. It turns hard landscapes into cheeses of remarkable generosity, depth, and endurance. Goat milk can bring brightness, tang, and a snowy white color. That white color alone can be striking. Many cow milk cheeses carry a cream or pale yellow tone because animals convert plant pigments into color that remains in the fat. Goats do this differently, so their cheeses often stay luminous and pale, almost moonlit in appearance. The flavor can be just as distinctive. Goat milk cheeses often have a lively acidity that feels bright on the tongue, along with aromas that can suggest citrus, herbs, fresh cream, or sometimes a more barnyard character depending on age and style. Fresh goat cheeses can seem almost sparkling in their energy, while aged ones may become nutty, wrinkled, or surprisingly complex. That range is part of the fascination. The same milk can move from delicate and spreadable to firm and cavalique in flavor as it matures. Goat cheese does not simply taste different for the sake of novelty. It offers its own way of being vivid, lean, and expressive from the very first bite. Auto buffalo milk gives mozzarella its famous richness and elasticity. This is where mozzarella becomes more than a generic soft white cheese. When it is made from water buffalo milk, the result often carries a fuller depth and a more luxurious texture than versions made from cow milk. Buffalo milk is especially rich, and that richness contributes to the tender, glossy body people prize in great mozzarella di bufala. When torn open, it can release moisture in a way that feels almost dramatic, while the interior stretches with a supple resistance that seems both delicate and resilient. The flavor is milky, though it can also carry a pleasant tang and a lingering creaminess that stays with you. This is not just a matter of tradition for tradition's sake. The milk itself helps create the identity of the cheese. Its composition supports that combination of softness and spring, of freshness and depth. In a very real sense, the celebrated texture begins long before stretching inside the milk of the animal itself. Reindeer milk is so rich, it can become extraordinary cheese. That fact opens a window onto a very different dairy world. Reindeer are not the animals most people imagine when they think of milk, yet in northern cultures they have supported human life in demanding environments for centuries. Their milk is astonishingly concentrated, with far more solids than the milk many people know best. That means even a small amount holds remarkable potential for dense, nourishing dairy foods. It also means cheesemaking from this milk, where it is practiced, can produce something rare and powerful rather than casual or everyday. The very existence of such cheese reminds us that dairying is not one uniform story centered only on familiar farm animals. It is a patchwork of local adaptations shaped by climate, migration, and survival. In the far north, where conditions can be severe and resources precious, a rich milk like this becomes more than a curiosity. It becomes evidence of human ingenuity meeting an extreme landscape with skill and respect. Even the same animal produces different milk across the seasons. Milk is not fixed like a factory formula. It changes with weather, feed, daylight, health, and the stage of the animal's lactation. That means spring milk is not simply the same liquid as autumn milk arriving in a different month. The balance of fat and protein can shift. Aromatic compounds can change. Yield can rise or fall. The result is that cheesemakers are often working with a moving target, even when they keep the same herd and the same methods. Traditional dairy cultures knew this intimately. They tasted the year in the vat. Some seasons offered milk suited to lighter styles. Others favored cheeses meant for longer aging or fuller texture. Modern systems can smooth out some of those changes, though they do not erase them entirely. This is one reason cheese can feel so alive as a craft. Nature does not hand over an identical ingredient every day. It offers a changing conversation, and the cheesemaker must keep listening. Spring grass can change a cheese before the cheesemaker even begins. By the time milk reaches the vat, part of the story has already been written out in the field. Fresh spring growth tends to be lush, tender, and full of compounds that move through the animal and leave subtle marks on the milk. This can affect aroma, color, texture, and the whole mood of a cheese long before any curd is cut. In some traditions, the arrival of spring milk is eagerly anticipated because it signals a shift in character that no amount of technical control can fully imitate later. Rich young grasses can support a sweeter, more vibrant expression, while the season's energy seems to travel all the way into the finished wheel. What makes this so fascinating is how indirect the cause appears. No one adds spring as an ingredient. Yet it enters anyway through the mouths of grazing animals, then passes into milk, then into cheese. A field wakes up, and weeks or months later, a cheese speaks with its accent. Wild herbs in pasture can echo later in a finished cheese. The path from flower to flavor can be astonishingly subtle. Animals grazing on diverse pasture do not eat a single uniform green. they encounter thyme, clover, yarrow, and countless other plants depending on the region. Those plants carry their own aromatic compounds, and some of that complexity can ripple through the milk in ways that later seem to reappear in the cheese. The result is rarely a blunt herbal note, as though someone had scattered dried leaves over the curd. It is much more mysterious than that. Sometimes the effect emerges as a floral lift. Sometimes it appears as a faint bitterness, a spicy edge, or a lingering meadow-like impression that is hard to name but easy to notice. This is one reason cheeses from biodiverse grazing lands can feel so captivating. Their flavor seems layered and hard to pin down. A finished cheese may be months old, yet somewhere inside it lingers a memory of what once grew under open sky. A region's plants quietly shape a region's cheeses. This happens through feed, through aroma, through seasonal growth, and through the wider agricultural pattern that surrounds dairying. A damp green valley does not produce the same forage as a dry upland slope, and that difference matters long before the milk is collected. Plants determine what animals graze, what hay is stored, and what flavors and nutrients move through the dairy system over the course of the year. Over time, that contributes to why certain regions become known for cheeses with recognizable character. People often focus on recipes, molds, or aging rooms, and those are indeed important. Yet beneath all of that sits the plant world, quietly setting the stage. Grasslands, herbs, shrubs, and flowering species all help define the possibilities of the milk itself. So when a cheese seems rooted in place, that sense of place is not only cultural or geographic, it is botanical as well. Landscapes grow their influence from the ground up. Cheese can taste of landscape as much as milk. That idea sits at the heart of why cheese fascinates people so deeply. It is not merely a transformed dairy product. In many cases, it is a map of where it came from. Soil influences plants. Plants feed animals. Weather shapes growth. Altitude, rainfall, and local habits all leave their trace somewhere in the chain. By the time the cheese reaches the table, it may carry a sense of mountain, marsh, meadow, coast, or dry hillside without ever naming those things directly. Tasters sometimes describe this with the language of place because ordinary flavor words do not quite cover it. They reach for terms like mineral, grassy, floral, woodland, or coastal, trying to capture something larger than simple taste. Whether every nuance can be scientifically pinned down is almost beside the point. The impression is real. Some cheeses do not just taste good, they taste situated. They seem to belong somewhere, and when you eat them, that somewhere arrives with them. Salt does far more than simply make cheese taste stronger. At first glance, salt seems like the simplest ingredient in the room. It sharpens flavor, adds savoriness, and makes food more vivid. In cheese, though, it acts more like a quiet director, guiding the entire performance. Salt helps draw out moisture, which changes texture, and influences how long a cheese can age. It slows the growth of some microbes while allowing others to thrive, which means it helps decide which living communities get to shape the final wheel. It also affects how enzymes work, how the rind develops, and how the paste firms over time. Too little, and a cheese may turn flat, unstable, or weakly defined. Too much, and it can become harsh or stunted before its best character appears. That is why salting is not a final flourish. It is a decisive moment in cheesemaking. A handful of crystals can steer flavor, structure, and survival all at once. Humidity can decide whether a rind blooms, cracks, or toughens. Aging cheese is often imagined as a matter of waiting, though the air around the cheese is never passive. Moisture in that air shapes the surface every day. If humidity is high enough, certain rinds can stay supple and active, allowing molds and bacteria to spread in the ways cheesemakers hope for. That is how some cheeses develop velvety white coats or sticky aromatic exteriors, instead of drying out too soon. If the air is too dry, the outside may harden before the inside is ready, trapping the paste and changing how the whole cheese matures. Cracks can appear. Unwanted toughness can set in. If it is too damp, the surface may become overly wet or unstable. So the rind is not merely the outside layer. It is a living frontier where atmosphere meets food. Change the humidity, and you may change the whole style of cheese that emerges from the aging room. Temperature changes can redirect an entire wheel's destiny. A wheel may look calm on the shelf, though inside it, many reactions are still unfolding. Enzymes continue breaking apart proteins and fats. Microbes keep growing, slowing, or yielding to new populations. All of that responds to temperature. Raise it slightly, and ripening may speed forward, pushing aroma and texture into a very different place. Lower it, and the same wheel may mature more slowly, holding on to firmness or delaying certain flavor changes. In some cases, even a modest shift can alter moisture movement, gas formation, rind behavior, and microbial balance enough to create a noticeably different result. That is why aging rooms are managed with such care. Temperature is not background. It is a steering force. A cheesemaker does not simply make a wheel and hope the cellar finishes the job. The cellar is part of the making. Warmth and coolness help decide whether the cheese becomes elegant, unruly, restrained, or magnificent. Aging cheese is controlled decay, turned into delicious design. That phrase can sound unsettling until you realize how much of great food depends on transformation that borders on breakdown. During aging, the cheese is not staying still, and it is not preserving its original state unchanged. It is being carefully taken apart from within. Proteins loosen into smaller, flavorful fragments. Fats split into compounds that can smell fruity, nutty, savory, spicy, or unexpectedly wild. Moisture shifts. Texture changes. The paste may become softer, denser, creamier, or more crystalline as time keeps working. In any other context, decay might sound like failure. Here, it becomes the source of depth and beauty, as long as it is guided with skill. That is the key. The process is not chaos. It is decomposition with boundaries. Humans create the right conditions, then allow nature to do the intricate work. When it goes well, the result feels almost miraculous. What was once fresh and simple becomes layered, mature, and impossible to mistake for anything younger. Some cheeses ripen from microbes on the rind, not within. In these cheeses, the outside acts almost like a slow-moving wave of transformation. Microbes settle on the surface and begin changing the environment there first. They alter acidity, break down proteins, and soften the paste nearest the rind before those changes reach the center. That means the outer layer is not only a skin, it is an active engine driving ripening inward. This is why certain cheeses can show such dramatic contrast from edge to core, especially when young. The creamy part appears first near the rind, while the middle lags behind for a while. Over time, the influence keeps traveling. What makes this so captivating is that the surface is doing far more than protecting the cheese. It is orchestrating the entire experience. The cheesemaker tends the exterior, and the exterior remakes the interior. A cheese like this invites you to think from the outside in, because that is exactly how its flavor and texture came into being. Others mature deep inside, while the outside stays almost unchanged. This creates a very different kind of mystery. From the rind, a wheel may seem steady and unremarkable, as though little is happening beyond the surface. Yet beneath that shell, slow internal changes are building character over months or years. Enzymes continue their work through the paste, shaping flavor and texture from within rather than relying on a dramatic rind-driven transformation. That can lead to cheeses whose interiors grow more savory, more crystalline, or more supple, while the outside remains firm and relatively quiet. In these cases, the rind is less a performer and more a guardian. It protects the interior environment while deeper processes unfold out of sight. There is something wonderful about that hidden development. You do not fully know what time has done until the cheese is opened. Then the surprise arrives in the cut, not on the shelf. Some cheeses advertise their ripening with visible bloom. Others keep their secrets until the knife tells the truth. Pressing curds changes moisture, texture, and how flavor later unfolds. Once curds are formed, they still contain a great deal of whey trapped between and inside them. Pressing helps push that liquid out, and in doing so, it changes far more than firmness alone. As the curds knit together under weight, they lose openness and gain structure. That affects how the cheese will age, how air moves through it, and how tightly packed the interior becomes. A lightly pressed cheese may stay more open, moist, and tender. A heavily pressed one can become dense, close-textured, and better suited to longer aging. This matters later because moisture shapes the speed and style of ripening. A wetter cheese invites one future. A drier one invites another. So the press is not just squeezing curd into shape for convenience. It is setting the conditions for flavor months down the line. In that moment, the cheesemaker is deciding how much water remains in the story, and water changes everything. Cutting curd smaller usually helps create a firmer cheese. That single action has surprisingly large consequences. When curds are cut, their total surface area increases. The smaller the pieces become, the more opportunity whey has to escape from them. More whey loss means less moisture remains in the final cheese, and that usually leads toward a firmer, drier style that can often age longer and develop a denser structure. Larger curds hold onto more liquid, which can support softer textures and a very different pace of ripening. So the knife, or curd cutter, is not simply dividing the mass for neatness. It is deciding how much of the milk's water stays along for the journey. That makes the cut size one of the earliest texture choices in the whole process. Before pressing, before salting, before aging, the cheesemaker is already shaping the destination by changing the size of those fragile pieces. A smaller cut can quietly turn a future cheese away from softness and toward durability. Stirring, cooking, draining, and stacking each change the final result. Cheesemaking can seem magical from the outside, though much of its magic lies in a chain of very physical actions. Stirring determines how curds move, toughen, and shed whey. Cooking raises temperature and changes how proteins contract, which can tighten texture and influence later aging. Draining decides how quickly the curds leave behind their surrounding liquid and enter the next phase of development. Stacking, in cheeses that use it, adds pressure, warmth, and contact that alter both structure and acidity. None of these steps is decorative. Each one nudges the cheese toward a different future. Change the intensity, duration, or order, and the outcome shifts with it. That is why cheesemaking feels so alive as a craft. The maker is not following one simple recipe from milk to wheel. They are guiding a procession of small transformations, each one setting up the next. The final cheese is the memory of every movement that came before it. Tiny differences in timing can separate brilliance from disaster. That is one of the thrilling and nerve-wracking truths of cheesemaking. A curd left a little too long before cutting may acidify differently. A wash applied too late may alter the rind's whole trajectory. A wheel moved from one environment to another a day early or a day late can head toward elegance or trouble. Because cheese depends on living systems and ongoing reactions, timing is not a minor detail to be cleaned up later. It is the pulse of the process. Makers watch, touch, smell, and judge when something is ready, rather than relying only on the clock. The milk itself has to be read. Conditions in the room matter. The stage of the curd matters. That means great cheesemaking is full of moments where the right decision must arrive at the right time. When it does, the result can feel effortless. When it does not, the same batch may drift away from the future it almost had. The bloomy rind on brie is a living, edible ecosystem. That white coat looks soft and simple, though it is really a whole community at work. On the surface, molds and yeasts grow together and slowly reshape the cheese beneath them. They feed, compete, and alter the chemistry of the rind in ways that make the outer layer become downy, fragrant, and edible, rather than harsh or dry. As they work, the surface develops notes that can suggest mushrooms, fresh cream, and warm cellars. The texture changes too. The rind becomes part of the experience rather than a barrier around it. This is what makes brie feel so remarkable. You are not only eating milk that has aged, you are eating the result of a miniature ecosystem that has settled on the cheese and transformed it from the outside. That soft white skin is full of life, and every bite carries the quiet labor of organisms shaping flavor together on a scale too small to see. Washed-rind cheeses owe their aroma to remarkably powerful surface bacteria. Some cheeses announce themselves long before they reach your mouth. The moment they are unwrapped, the room changes. That striking aroma comes largely from bacteria that thrive on the damp, salty rind during aging. These organisms are astonishing chemists. As they grow, they produce compounds that can smell meaty, savory, pungent, earthy, or almost shockingly animal. Yet the surprise is what happens next. The taste is often far less aggressive than the smell suggests. A cheese that seems almost outrageous on the nose can turn out rich, balanced, and deeply satisfying on the tongue. That contrast is part of the thrill. Washed-rind cheeses teach you not to trust first impressions too quickly. Their surface microbes create a kind of aromatic drama, then reveal a gentler inner world beneath it. Few foods play this game so boldly. They challenge the senses, overturn expectation, and reward anyone curious enough to move past the first startling encounter. That orange rind often comes from microbes, not added color. It is easy to assume that bright orange on a cheese must have been painted on by human hands. In many cases, the real artists are bacteria living on the rind. As these microbes multiply under the right damp and salty conditions, they can create warm tones ranging from sunset gold to rusty orange. The color is a sign that the surface is alive and changing, not merely decorated for display. This matters because it turns the rind into a visible record of microbial growth. You are seeing biology, not just presentation. The shade can deepen or fade depending on the species involved and the way the cheese is cared for during aging. That gives certain cheeses a look that feels almost theatrical, though the cause is entirely natural. A glowing orange rind can seem like a bold cosmetic choice. In truth, it is often the result of invisible organisms leaving their signature in plain sight for anyone willing to notice. Blue cheese mold needs oxygen to paint veins through the paste. Without air, those famous streaks would never appear in the way people expect. The mold inside blue cheese cannot simply spread anywhere it pleases through a solid closed mass. It needs access to oxygen, which is why cheesemakers pierce the wheels with long needles during aging. Those tiny channels let air travel inward, and once that happens, the mold can begin growing along those paths. The result is the beautiful branching pattern people recognize at once, with blue or green lines winding through pale paste, like a hidden map. This gives blue cheese one of the most dramatic visual stories in the dairy world. The veins are not random stains. They are traces of a carefully opened pathway between the outside world and the center of the wheel. A cheesemaker pricks the surface, air enters, and color begins to bloom in darkness. Few foods show such a vivid partnership between structure, oxygen, and living growth. A natural rind records the whole history of aging. It is less like packaging and more like a diary written in dust, air, touch, and time. As a cheese matures without an artificial barrier, its surface gathers the marks of the environment around it. Moisture leaves. Microbes settle and grow. Hands turn the wheel, brush it, and move it from shelf to shelf. The rind responds to every one of those moments. It may wrinkle, darken, harden, bloom, or develop patches that reveal what the aging room was like over weeks and months. In that sense, the outside of the cheese becomes a record of everything it has lived through. A natural rind is history made visible. It can tell skilled eyes whether the cave was damp, whether the wheel was handled carefully, and whether the aging unfolded in balance or in struggle. Before the knife even touches the interior, the surface is already telling a story about how the cheese became what it is. Ash on cheese was once practical before it became stylish. Today, it can look dramatic and elegant, a charcoal line or dark coating that makes a cheese feel almost ceremonial. Its earlier uses were more practical. Ash could help manage the surface of a cheese by drying it, discouraging certain unwanted growth and creating conditions that favored a more balanced rind. In some cases, it also helped offset acidity on fresh cheeses, making the surface more hospitable to the microbes needed for ripening. So what now appears as a refined visual flourish began as a useful material with a real job to do. That history gives ash a special kind of charm. It reminds you how often beauty in food begins as problem-solving. A cheesemaker reaches for what is available and effective. Then, over time, that practical solution becomes part of the aesthetic language of cheese itself. The dark line running through a round of goat cheese is not only beautiful, it is a memory of older craft wisdom. Cloth-bound cheddar breathes differently from cheddar sealed in plastic. That difference changes the cheese in profound ways. A cloth-bound wheel is wrapped in fabric, often with fat worked into the surface, then allowed to age while still exchanging a controlled amount of moisture and air with its surroundings. The cloth does not shut the cheese away from the world completely. It creates a more porous relationship with the cellar, which can encourage deeper, savory flavors, a drier texture, and a rind that feels more connected to traditional aging. Plastic does merely the opposite. It protects the cheese in a tighter seal, limits moisture loss, and pushes the cheddar toward a smoother, more uniform result. Neither method is meaningless packaging. Each one helps shape the finished character. Cloth-bound versions can become crumbly, nutty, and richly textured in a way people often describe as more old-fashioned or more alive. Sealed versions tend toward consistency and softness. The wrap is not an afterthought. It is part of the cheesemaking decision itself. Some rinds are brushed, some washed, and some deliberately left alone. That variety reveals how many different philosophies exist in aging cheese. A brushed rind is carefully tended, so loose molds and debris are managed while the surface develops in a controlled way. A washed rind is actively encouraged toward a particular microbial life through repeated attention with brine or other liquids. Then there are cheeses whose surfaces are disturbed as little as possible, allowing local molds and yeasts to settle in their own pattern and produce something more rustic or unpredictable. Each choice reflects a different relationship between maker and microbe. Some cheeses are guided closely, others are coaxed, others are watched with restraint. This matters because the rind is where environment, technique, and biology first meet each other so visibly. How it is treated changes not only appearance, but aroma, texture, and the pace of ripening. So the surface tells you something about the cheesemaker's style. It reveals whether the aging was managed like a garden, a workshop, or a wilderness. Cheese caves recreate the cool, damp conditions once found underground. Long before modern climate control, caves offered something cheesemakers desperately needed. They stayed cooler than the outside world and held moisture in the air with a steadiness that made aging possible. That stable environment slowed spoilage, supported the right microbes, and gave wheels the time they needed to develop complex flavor. Today, many cheese caves are purpose-built rooms rather than natural hollows in rock, yet the goal remains much the same. They imitate the conditions that underground spaces once provided so naturally. Walking to one, and the shift is immediate. The air feels heavier. The temperature settles. The shelves hold cheeses that are not merely stored there, but transformed there. This gives the cave an almost mythic status in cheesemaking, though its power is very practical. It offers the right climate for slow change. A cave is where patience becomes a technique, and where a cheese can spend months becoming more itself than it was on the day it was made. Affineurs mature cheese the way winemakers guide a vintage. They do not usually make the cheese from milk, though they help determine what it ultimately becomes. An affineur is a specialist in aging, someone who selects cheeses and then guides them through the final stages of development with extraordinary attention. They choose when a wheel should rest longer, when it needs turning, when humidity should shift, and when the cheese has reached its peak. In that sense, they work not as manufacturers, but as interpreters of potential. Two identical young cheeses may head toward different futures depending on who matures them and how carefully that process is managed. This is why affineurs are so often compared to cellar masters in wine. They understand timing, environment, and readiness at a deep level. Their skill lies in recognizing what a cheese wants to become, then helping it arrive there without forcing it too fast. The result is not just aged cheese. It is a cheese brought fully into character by expert judgment. Cheese aroma comes from hundreds of compounds working together. The smell of cheese can seem simple at first. It may strike you as buttery, nutty, earthy, fruity, or strong. Yet behind that first impression is an astonishing molecular chorus. As cheese ages, fats, proteins, and sugars are transformed into many volatile compounds that drift upward into the air. Some are delicate and floral. Some are savory and brothy. Some suggest toast, mushrooms, onions, grouse, or cellar stone. None of them acts alone for long. They overlap, soften one another, and combine into something the nose reads as a single identity. That is why great cheese can feel so layered and hard to pin down with one word. The aroma is not built from one dominant note. It is woven from many small signals arriving together. A wedge held near the face becomes a kind of invisible architecture. You are smelling chemistry assembled into personality, one drifting molecule at a time. The same cheese can smell stronger than it tastes. That surprise has puzzled and delighted cheese lovers for centuries. You unwrap a piece, and the aroma seems almost overwhelming, as if the flavor must surely be just as fierce. Then you taste it, and what arrives is softer, rounder, and more balanced than the nose had promised. This happens because smell and taste are not the same sense, even though they are closely linked. Some compounds leap eagerly into the air and make their presence known before the cheese ever reaches the mouth. Others stay quieter until warmth, chewing, and saliva begin releasing them. The nose often receives the most dramatic introduction, while the tongue meets a more integrated version of the whole. That is why certain notorious cheeses can turn out to be surprisingly approachable once sampled. Their reputation is carried by their aroma, not by harshness on the palate. Cheese can bluff, tease, and misdirect, then reveal a gentler truth when you finally take the bite. Texture changes flavor because the mouth releases aromas differently. A cheese is never just tasted. It is broken, warmed, pressed, dissolved, and moved around the mouth in ways that shape what the nose eventually perceives. A creamy cheese spreads quickly and coats the tongue, releasing aroma in a smooth, rolling wave. A crumbly one breaks into pieces, exposing more surface and sending different signals upward as you chew. A dense cheese may open slowly, asking for more time before its deeper notes appear. This is why texture can seem to alter flavor even when the ingredients are the same. The structure controls the speed and pattern of release. It decides how fat melts, how saliva mingles, and how aromatic compounds travel from mouth to nose. So the mouth is not a passive stage where flavor simply lands. It is part of the mechanism that creates flavor as an experience. In cheese, feel and taste are partners from the first contact to the last lingering note. Melting transforms structure, releasing fat, aroma, and pure comfort. When cheese melts, it does not merely get hot and soft. Its internal structure begins to loosen. The protein network that once held shape starts relaxing, and fat that had been more tightly trapped begins to flow more freely. As that happens, aromas become more mobile and more abundant. Suddenly the room fills with signals that were quieter before, and the cheese seems to bloom into a larger presence than it had when cold. This is one reason melted cheese feels so irresistibly inviting. Heat changes not only texture, but the whole sensory event. A firm slice becomes glossy, elastic, and aromatic in a matter of moments. Browning can add still more depth, bringing roasted notes and a richer finish. There is science in every part of this transformation, yet it also feels wonderfully emotional. Melted cheese seems to promise shelter, abundance, and warmth all at once, which may be why people respond to it with such immediate delight. Not all cheeses melt, and that mystery is chemistry. Many people assume heat turns every cheese into a bubbling golden pool. Then they meet one that softens only slightly, weeps oil, or simply holds its shape. The reason lies in the structure built long before the cheese reaches the pan. Moisture matters. Acidity matters. Salt matters. So does the way proteins were arranged during making and aging. In some cheeses, those proteins form a network that loosens beautifully under heat. In others, the network remains too tight, too dry, or too altered by acid to flow in the same way. That is why a young melting cheese behaves so differently from a dry, aged one, even if both began with milk. Heat reveals the decisions and changes locked inside the cheese from the start. The mystery feels magical because the result is so visible. Put two cheeses under the same flame and one may stretch into silk while the other stays stubbornly itself. Chemistry decides which story unfolds. Halloumi resists melting because its proteins are tightly bound. That unusual behavior is what makes it such a marvel in the pan. While many cheeses collapse into softness, halloumi holds its form, browns on the outside, and becomes warm and yielding without turning to liquid. The secret lies in the way it is made. Its curd is handled and heated in a manner that creates a protein structure more resistant to flowing under heat than most people expect from cheese. The result is something almost unique in the dairy world, a cheese you can fry or grill as though it were built for fire. This changes how people use it and how they think about cheese itself. Instead of becoming sauce, it becomes substance. Instead of disappearing into a dish, it remains present as a distinct bite with a squeak, a spring, and a salty richness all its own. Halloumi feels like a small defiance of expectation, a cheese that answers heat with firmness rather than surrender. Aged cheeses often become more savory as proteins break apart. Time does not simply make cheese sharper. It can also make it deeper, richer, and more full of that satisfying savor people often describe as meaty or brothy. One reason is proteolysis, the gradual breakdown of proteins into smaller fragments and amino acids as enzymes keep working during aging. Some of those fragments contribute directly to taste, adding complexity and a more resonant character that lingers on the palate. This is part of why an aged cheese can seem so concentrated, as though a whole meal has been folded into one bite. It is not merely salt or strength speaking. It is the accumulation of many small chemical changes that create a deeper, savory impression over time. In a young cheese, the flavor may feel milky and straightforward. In an older one, the same foundation has been transformed into something far more layered. Aging turns protein into narrative, and savoriness is one of the great plots it writes. Cheese crystals are signs of change, not signs of failure. To someone meeting them for the first time, those tiny, crunchy bits can seem alarming. Cheese is supposed to be smooth, so why is it suddenly sparkling between the teeth? In many cases, the answer is wonderfully reassuring. Crystals often appear because the cheese has been aging and evolving in exactly the sort of slow, intricate way that gives mature cheeses their charm. Different kinds can form for different reasons, and their presence can signal that moisture, minerals, and breakdown products have been shifting over time inside the paste. Rather than suggesting spoilage, they often point to development and concentration. They create contrast too, a little flicker of texture inside something otherwise dense or creamy. That contrast can make a bite feel more alive and memorable. So the crunch is not always a flaw to fear. It can be a message from time itself, saying that the cheese has been busy becoming something more complex than it was before. Bitterness, nuttiness, sweetness, and fruitiness can all appear in cheese. This is one of the reasons cheese escapes every simple definition people try to place on it. It is easy to think of it as only salty, creamy, or savory, yet a good tasting can quickly overturn that narrow picture. Some cheeses carry a walnut-like warmth. Others seem to hint at caramel, apples, pineapple, broth, or toasted grain. A slight bitterness can add depth and seriousness rather than unpleasantness, especially when it balances richer notes around it. Sweetness may emerge in unexpected places, not as sugar, but as a rounded impression created by aging and aroma. Fruitiness can appear almost like a ghost, more sensed than stated, then vanish into a nutty or earthy finish. This breadth makes cheese feel more like a world than a category. It holds far more than one flavor family at once. A single bite can cross several sensory territories, which is why people keep returning to it with surprise, even after years of eating it. Great cheese tasting is really a lesson in patient noticing. The most rewarding moments often come after the first quick judgment has passed. At first, you may notice only salt, cream, or strength. Then, if you slow down, the cheese begins to unfold in stages. The aroma shifts as it warms. The texture changes as it moves across the tongue. A second wave of flavor appears where a first one seemed to end. What felt blunt becomes detailed. What felt familiar becomes strange in the best possible way. This is why cheese can teach attention so well. It asks you to stay with it a little longer than you expected. A hurried bite gives information. A patient bite gives revelation. You begin to notice contrast, sequence, and aftertaste. You notice how smell and texture work together. You notice that the finish may tell a different story from the opening. In that way, tasting cheese becomes more than consumption. It becomes practice in how to listen carefully with the senses. Provolone can be hung like a giant edible pendulum. Some forms of provolone are shaped and suspended in ways that make them look almost architectural. Large pear-shaped or elongated versions may hang by cords during aging, swaying slightly in storage, like heavy dairy lanterns. This is not only visually striking. Hanging changes how the cheese dries, settles, and develops its outer form over time. Gravity becomes part of the process. The shape stretches downward, the rind forms in open air, and the cheese acquires a presence that feels halfway between food and object. In markets or aging spaces, these hanging cheeses can look almost ceremonial, as though they belong in a bell tower rather than on a board. That theatrical appearance suits provolone well, because it often carries a flavor that grows bolder with age, moving from milky youth into something sharper and more assertive. Few cheeses seem so comfortable taking up space. A great hanging provolone does not hide on the shelf. It occupies the room. Gjetost is made by browning whey until it tastes caramelized. This Norwegian cheese begins where many other cheeses would consider the useful part already gone. After curds are removed, whey remains, still carrying milk sugars and other dissolved components. Instead of discarding it, makers simmer it for a long time until water evaporates and the sugars brown. The result is something utterly unlike most cheeses people expect. Gjetost becomes dense, smooth and brown, with a flavor that can suggest caramel, fudge and tang all at once. It sits in a fascinating borderland between cheese and confection, savory and sweet, rustic and surprising. That transformation is deeply satisfying because it turns what seems secondary into something unforgettable. A byproduct becomes the main event. There is real ingenuity in that. It shows how dairy traditions can push far beyond the familiar wheel and wedge. Gjetost asks you to rethink what cheese can be, then rewards your curiosity with a taste that feels almost impossible the first time it happens. Paneer stays firm in heat and never truly melts. That quality makes it one of the most useful and distinctive cheeses in the kitchen. Paneer is formed by curdling milk with acid, then pressing the curds into a compact block. Because of the way its proteins are set, it can be heated, simmered, fried or grilled without flowing into a sauce. Instead, it keeps its shape and offers a tender bite that absorbs the flavors around it. This gives paneer a role very different from cheeses valued for stretch or ooze. It behaves almost like an ingredient with its own quiet strength, ready to sit in spiced gravies, crisp at the edges in a pan, or carry smoke from a grill. That firmness also makes it feel wonderfully direct. There is no mystery about what it will do under heat. It remains itself. In a world where melted cheese gets so much attention, paneer stands apart as a reminder that steadfastness can be just as fascinating as surrender. Cottage cheese and parmesan begin worlds apart and end worlds apart. Set these two cheeses side by side, and they seem to belong to different universes. One is loose, moist, and fresh, with soft curds that feel almost unfinished by design. The other is dense, dry, and aged, until it can be shattered or grated into fragrant grains. What makes that contrast so fascinating is that both begin with the same broad raw material, milk, then diverge almost immediately into different destinies. Cottage cheese is made for immediacy. It keeps much of its moisture and reaches the table with very little aging. Parmesan follows the opposite path, losing water, gaining structure, and developing intense depth over a very long stretch of time. One tastes of freshness and mild lactic simplicity. The other carries concentration, savor, and the memory of years. Together, they show how flexible cheesemaking truly is. The same starting point can lead to breakfast curds in a bowl or a monumental wheel built for patience. Whey, once treated as waste, can become food again. For a long time, whey was easy to overlook. After the curds were gathered, what remained looked thin and secondary, a pale liquid left behind after the main event. Yet whey still carries valuable proteins, sugars, minerals, and flavor, which means it is far from empty. In many food traditions, people learned not to waste it. It could be cooked down, fermented, fed into further dairy making, used in baking, or turned into drinks and other foods with their own character. This is one of the great quiet lessons of cheesemaking. What seems like residue can still hold possibility. A vat does not divide into useful and useless. It divides into one product and then another opportunity. That way of thinking feels deeply human and deeply practical. It reflects a world where food was too precious to discard casually. Whey teaches that value can linger in the overlooked part, waiting for someone to imagine one more transformation. Ricotta is made from what cheesemaking leaves behind. Its very name points toward return, because ricotta means cooked again. After other cheeses are made, whey still contains proteins that did not join the first curd. When that liquid is reheated, often with a bit of added acidity, those remaining proteins gather into delicate, soft curds that can be skinned off and enjoyed in their own right. The result feels almost miraculous, a second cheese appearing from what seemed to be leftovers. Ricotta does not usually arrive with the gravity of a cave-aged wheel or the drama of a washed rind. Its magic is gentler than that. It lies in rescue, thrift, and elegance, born from what was nearly missed. The curds are light, moist, and tender, yet the idea behind them is intellectually rich. Cheesemaking was not satisfied with one harvest from milk. It found a way to ask the liquid for more. Ricotta is proof that dairy knowledge kept listening after others might have stopped. Processed cheese was invented to make cheese last and melt consistently. That invention belongs to a very modern kind of food problem. Traditional cheeses can vary from wheel to wheel, and their behavior under heat can be wonderfully unpredictable. Some break, some oil off, some melt beautifully on one day and differently on another. Processed cheese answered that uncertainty with control. By blending keys with emulsifying salts and carefully managing heat and moisture, makers created a product that could stay stable longer and melt in a far more uniform way. This was not merely an attempt to imitate cheese cheaply. It was a technological solution to storage, transport, and consistency in an industrial food system. That is why processed cheese became so important in sandwiches, burgers, and mass catering. It performs reliably. It bends to modern convenience with remarkable discipline. Whether people love it or dismiss it, its creation tells a fascinating story. Cheese was not only aged and protected, it was engineered to behave the same way, again and again. Some cheeses are still wrapped in leaves, bark, or cloth. Those coverings can look rustic or romantic, though they often began with practical intent. A leaf might help protect a soft cheese while also lending subtle aroma and helping manage moisture at the surface. Bark can act as a sturdy cradle, supporting a fragile washed rind cheese that might otherwise slump or spread. Cloth can allow a wheel to breathe while still giving it structure during aging. In each case, the wrapping becomes part of the cheese's environment rather than simple decoration. It shapes ripening, handling, and even how the finished cheese is perceived before the first bite. There is something wonderful about that closeness between food and material. A cheese may carry part of the forest, the field, or the workshop with it quite literally on its outside. These wraps remind us that cheesemaking was often built from what was nearby and useful. The result can be beautiful, though beauty arrived as a companion to necessity, not its replacement. Smoking can turn a quiet cheese into something campfire deep. A mild cheese can seem almost transformed when smoke enters the picture. What was once creamy and straightforward suddenly takes on layers of wood, fire, toast, and evening air. Smoking does more than add a single flavor note. It shifts the whole personality of the cheese, giving it a darker register and a sense of depth that can feel larger than the original curd ever suggested. Different woods create different impressions, from sweet and mellow to sharp and resinous, so the effect is not one fixed thing. Time matters too. A brief exposure can whisper. A longer one can seem to wrap the cheese in a cloak of smoke. What makes this so fascinating is that the interior may still remain recognizably itself. The milk is there. The texture is there. Yet everything now feels shadowed by fire. Smoking turns a simple cheese into a conversation between dairy and flame, comfort, and wilderness. Spices, herbs, and truffles can redirect a cheese's identity. Additions like these do not always sit politely at the edge of the experience. Sometimes they seize the wheel and steer it somewhere completely new. Black pepper can make a cheese seem warmer and more vivid. Herbs can pull it toward green freshness or floral complexity. Truffle can drape it in an earthy aroma so commanding that the original cheese becomes part of a larger performance rather than the whole show. This is what makes flavored cheeses so interesting when they are done well. They are not merely plain cheeses with extras sprinkled in. They become new compositions, where the added ingredient reshapes what you notice first, what lingers, and what the cheese seems to be trying to say. That can rescue a mild style from anonymity or give an already expressive cheese a new dimension. A wheel that once felt familiar may suddenly suggest forest floor, garden air, or spiced warmth. Identity in cheese can be redirected with astonishing ease. Seeds and molds helped humans create cheeses impossible in nature alone. Left entirely to chance, milk can sour or spoil, though it does not automatically become the full range of cheeses people now know. Humans changed that by learning to guide living forces with intention. They used starter cultures, which are often linked to a previous batch, to seed milk with the microbes they wanted. They introduced selected molds to create bloomy rinds and blue veining that would not arise in the same way by accident. They repeated methods until those invisible helpers became reliable partners. This is one of the most remarkable things about cheesemaking. It is not just preservation or cooking. It is microbial design carried out over centuries by people who often did not know the organisms by scientific name, yet understood their behavior with real sophistication. Cheese became more varied because humans learned how to invite the right life into it. Entire families of cheese exist because people moved beyond waiting and began directing fermentation itself. Raw milk cheeses can carry more microbial complexity and more debate. These cheeses often stand at the center of passionate arguments because they bring together flavor, tradition, risk, and regulation in one intensely charged subject. Raw milk still contains its native microbial community, and that can contribute to a more varied and sometimes more distinctive ripening process. Supporters often argue that this living complexity can produce flavors that feel more expressive of place and less standardized. Critics point to safety concerns, especially when milk handling or aging conditions are not well controlled. That tension has made raw milk cheese one of the most argued over topics in the dairy world. It is not merely a technical question. It touches identity, law, trust, and the meaning of authenticity in food. What fascinates people is that the same feature can be praised as richness and feared as danger. Few cheeses carry so much invisible drama. Inside a raw milk wheel lies both microbial diversity and a continuing cultural dispute about how food ought to be made. Pasteurized milk changed safety, flavor, and the politics of cheese. Heating milk to reduce harmful microbes was a major shift in the history of dairy. It promised greater control and helped make large-scale cheesemaking safer and more reliable, especially in systems serving huge populations. That alone would have made it important. Yet pasteurization also changed the microbial starting point of the milk, which meant makers had to rebuild flavor and fermentation in different ways, often with added cultures and more standardized methods. To some people, that brought welcome consistency. To others, it marked a loss of complexity and local character. This is why pasteurization became more than a safety step. It became a dividing line in arguments about craft, regulation, and what counts as real quality in cheese. One side sees protection and public health. Another sees compromise and homogenization. Most cheese counters today exist somewhere in the long shadow of that debate. A simple act of heating milk helped redraw the relationship between tradition, technology, and trust. Cheese inspired guilds, laws, festivals, and fierce regional pride. Once cheese became important enough to trade, judge, and celebrate, it stopped being only food and became part of civic identity. Towns organized around it. Makers formed guilds to protect standards, pass on skills, and defend reputation. Laws appeared because names, methods, and markets suddenly mattered. Festivals grew because people wanted to honor the cheeses that defined their valleys, villages, and seasons. In many places, a local cheese was not just something eaten at home. It was proof of belonging. It told outsiders who the region was, what its land could produce, and why its traditions deserved respect. That is why arguments over cheese can become so passionate. People are rarely arguing only about taste. They are defending memory, labor, ancestry, and place. A wheel on a table may look humble, though behind it can stand centuries of pride. Cheese has inspired institutions because it gave communities something tangible to organize around and something deeply local to love. Some cheeses are protected so tightly they can only come from one place. That level of protection reveals how seriously people take the bond between cheese and origin. In these cases, a name is not treated as a loose style anyone can copy anywhere. It is tied to a specific geography, and often to particular breeds, feeds, methods, and aging conditions as well. The idea is that the cheese belongs to a place in more than a sentimental way. The place helps make it what it is. Remove the landscape, the local practice, or the inherited rules, and you may create something excellent, though not the same thing. This is why protected designations can be so strict. They are trying to preserve not just a recipe, but a whole ecosystem of culture and production. A name becomes a compact between land and law. That can seem almost astonishing in a world of mass copying. Some cheeses are considered so rooted that the world has agreed they cannot be separated from home. Counterfeit cheese exists because famous names are so valuable. Imitation follows prestige. Once a cheese name becomes famous enough to signal quality, tradition, or luxury, someone somewhere will try to borrow that reputation without earning it. That is how counterfeit cheese enters the story. A label may echo a protected name, mimic a region, or suggest an authenticity the product does not truly possess. To the casual buyer, the difference can be hard to spot. Yet the existence of such fakes tells you something important. These names are not merely descriptive. They carry commercial power. People will pay more for what they trust, what they recognize, and what they believe connects them to a place with history behind it. Counterfeiting tries to capture that value without the same labor or origin. In a curious way, it is an unintended compliment. Nobody bothers to fake the forgettable. Famous cheese names attract imitation because they have become symbols, and symbols are always tempting targets when money is involved. Cheese wheels can function as collateral in parts of Italy. That sounds almost surreal, as though a seller had quietly become a bank vault. Yet in parts of Italy, especially where long, aged, hard cheeses hold significant value, wheels can indeed serve as financial assets. Because they mature over time and can command high prices once ready, they are not just foods awaiting sale. They are stored wealth. A producer with rows of aging wheels may be holding future income in tangible form, and financial systems have sometimes treated those wheels accordingly. The idea is astonishingly concrete. Instead of abstract numbers on a screen, there are actual rounds of cheese resting on wooden shelves, slowly becoming more valuable month by month. It is finance you could smell. This reveals how thoroughly cheese can cross from nourishment into economics. A wheel may begin as milk in a vat, though with time and trust it can become part of credit, investment, and business survival. Few foods age into something so literally bankable. Enormous wheels were made partly because big cheese ages differently. Size changes everything. A very large wheel does not simply provide more cheese than a small one. It matures according to different physical rules. The ratio of rind to interior shifts, which means the center is affected more slowly by the outside world. Moisture leaves at a different pace. Temperature and enzymatic change move through a much greater mass. The result can be a deeper and more gradual development, but small cheeses cannot reproduce in quite the same way. This is one reason monumental wheels became so important in certain traditions. Their scale was not only practical for storage and trade, it was part of the flavor strategy itself. Big cheeses could survive long aging and emerge with textures and complexities that depended on that very bulk. Standing beside one of these giants, you realize size has become an ingredient. The wheel's physical mass is helping shape taste. A cheesemaker is not merely making more. They are making different. Royal courts once prized certain cheeses as luxury gifts. That fact reveals how far cheese could travel in status. What began as practical preserved milk did not remain confined to the farmhouse table. In many periods, certain distinguished cheeses reached courts and noble households, where they could be presented as gifts worthy of rulers and elites. The reasons were easy to understand. Some cheeses came from famous regions, required careful aging, or traveled long distances without losing their value. They could represent rarity, craftsmanship, and regional excellence all at once. To present such a cheese was to offer more than food. It was to offer a piece of reputation. Courts, of course, loved foods that could signal refinement and connection to prized lands or producers. So a wheel or carefully packed round became part of the language of prestige. There is something delightful in that ascent. A product born from necessity and fermentation entered the theatre of power, where it could sit among jewels, silks, and diplomatic gestures as a worthy treasure. Sailors, soldiers, and travelers relied on hard cheese for survival. When people had to move far from fresh food, hard cheese became one of the most dependable companions they could carry. It was dense with nourishment, slow to spoil compared with fresh milk, and sturdy enough to endure long journeys by sea or land. That mattered immensely in worlds shaped by war, migration, and trade. A soldier marching or a sailor months from shore could not rely on fragile foods that demanded immediate use. Hard cheese offered concentrated sustenance in a form that tolerated time and hardship. It could be rationed, packed, traded, and eaten with little preparation. In many cases, it helped turn milk from a local daily product into portable fuel for movement across great distances. That makes cheese part of a larger human story about endurance. It traveled with armies, crossed oceans, and rode in wagons because it answered a simple, desperate need. People needed food that would last, and hard cheese was ready. Cheesemaking gave people a way to store summer for winter. That may be one of the most beautiful truths in all of food history. During the abundant months, animals grazed well and milk flowed more generously. Yet summer does not stay. Grass fades, weather turns, and the easy season passes. Cheesemaking allowed people to gather some of that fleeting abundance and preserve it in a form that could wait for colder, darker days. In that sense, a maturing wheel is more than preserved dairy. It is a season held in reserve. The fat and protein of lush pasture months are carried forward into winter, when fresh milk may be scarce or impossible to count on. This gives cheese an emotional weight as well as a practical one. It represents foresight and trust in the future. Families worked while the fields were green so that food would remain when the world grew bare. A cellar of cheese was not just stock. It was summer stored against the coming cold. Cheese spread across continents by trade, migration, and empire. Cheese did not stay where it first developed. It traveled with people, and people have always moved for opportunity, conquest, survival, faith, and curiosity. Traders carried cheeses themselves, along with tools and knowledge about how to make them. Migrants brought remembered methods into new lands, then adapted them to new animals, climates, and ingredients. Empires widened the scale of that exchange sometimes spreading dairy traditions through force, sometimes creating markets and roads that let foods move farther than before. Along the way, cheese changed. Old styles were reinterpreted. New regional forms emerged. Names shifted. Techniques mixed with local practice and became something fresh. That long movement helps explain why the global cheese world feels both connected and wonderfully varied. A cheese can trace ancestry to one region and still develop a different life in another. Every wheel is part of a map, drawn not only by pastures and cellars, but by human movement across history. Every great cheese tells a story about climate, necessity, and craft. No great cheese appears from nowhere. Behind it stands a climate that shaped the pasture, the animals, and the possibilities of aging. There is also necessity, because many celebrated cheeses began as answers to practical problems about preserving food, surviving seasons, or transporting nourishment. Then craft enters and turns survival into art. People observe, refine, repeat, and pass on methods until a local solution becomes a masterpiece. That is why cheese can feel so rich, even before you taste it. A great example holds weather, economy, geography, and human intelligence together in one edible form. You can sense that it belongs to a particular world and a particular history of making do brilliantly with what was available. Some foods satisfy hunger. Great cheese does more. It carries a landscape, a hardship, and a learned skill all at once. To understand it fully is to realize you are never tasting milk alone. You are tasting a whole inheritance. Lactose drops in many aged cheeses as microbes consume it. Milk begins with lactose as one of its defining sugars, though that sweetness does not simply remain untouched through the life of a cheese. In many aged varieties, bacteria feed on lactose early in the process and convert it into other compounds, especially acids that help shape texture and flavor. As aging continues, very little of that original sugar may remain. This is one reason fresh milky sweetness often fades, while sharper, deeper, or more savory notes take over. It also helps explain why cheeses made from the same raw material can feel so different by the time they reach the board. What began as a sugary dairy liquid has been metabolized into something much more complex. There is a quiet elegance in that transformation. Invisible organisms steadily remove one of milk's most basic features, then replace it with a whole new sensory world. Aged cheese does not merely preserve milk. It remakes its chemistry from the inside out. Cheese concentrates milk's nutrients into a much smaller package. That is part of what made it so valuable for so much of human history. Milk is abundant in water, which makes it refreshing and useful, though also bulky and perishable. Cheesemaking changes that balance by removing much of the liquid and gathering a large share of the remaining nutrients into a denser form. Protein becomes more concentrated. Fat becomes more concentrated. Minerals remain in a tighter, more portable package than they had in the pail. This helps explain why cheese could nourish travelers, laborers, and families through difficult seasons. A relatively small piece might contain the richness of a much larger volume of milk. That concentration also shapes how cheese feels to eat. It seems weightier, more sustaining, more complete in a small amount. There is real ingenuity in that. Humans found a way not only to preserve milk, but to compress much of its value into a form that could be stored, shared, and carried with remarkable efficiency. Casein proteins build the hidden scaffolding of nearly every cheese. Without casein, there would be no curd to gather, no wheel to age, and no soft interior to slice through later. These proteins float in milk in tiny clusters, mostly unnoticed until cheesemaking begins. Then, through acid or enzymes or both, their arrangement changes. What had been suspended starts linking together into a network strong enough to trap fat, water, and minerals. That network becomes the framework of the cheese. It determines whether the curd feels delicate or sturdy, open or tight, supple or brittle. From the outside, cheese may seem defined by rind, aroma, or age. Beneath all of that sits this protein architecture holding the whole thing together. It is the invisible engineering of cheese. A maker may cut, stir, heat, and press, though every action is really working on that internal scaffold. The great variety of cheeses begins with many differences, but nearly all of them depend on casein becoming structure rather than suspension. Fat carries flavor, but water content shapes the whole experience. People often praise rich cheese by talking about fat, and for good reason. Fat holds and releases many aromatic compounds, giving cheese fullness, pleasure, and length on the palate. Yet fat alone does not determine what the experience will feel like. Water matters just as much in its own way, because moisture influences texture, aroma release, firmness, and the speed at which flavor unfolds in the mouth. A moist cheese may seem lush, cool, and immediate. A drier one may feel concentrated, crumbly, and slow to reveal itself. Water affects aging too, guiding which changes continue and how intensely they proceed. This means the soul of the cheese is not just richness. It is balance between what remains liquid-like and what has been concentrated away. Fat gives opulence, though water gives rhythm. One carries flavor. The other decides how that flavor moves, lingers, and finally disappears. Great cheese depends on both working in quiet partnership. Cheese can pair with fruit because chemistry loves contrast. A slice of apple beside a salty cheese can feel almost magically right, though the magic has clear sensory roots. Fruit brings sweetness, acidity, and bright aromatic compounds that can lift and sharpen the richer, denser qualities of cheese. Cheese, in turn, offers fat, salt, and savory depth that make fruit taste fuller and more vivid. Each one throws the other into better focus. Pear can flatter a brie cheese by softening its intensity. Grapes can refresh the mouth after something firm and aged. Figs can deepen the sense of richness while also adding gentle sweetness. This is not only about tradition or pretty serving boards. It is about contrast, doing real work in the mouth. The meeting of creamy and crisp, savory and sweet, dense and juicy, keeps the senses awake. Pairing fruit with cheese feels satisfying because neither side overwhelms the other. Chemistry rewards difference when difference is balanced well. Even silence matters while cheese ages, because vibration can disturb it. Cheese may seem like a still object on a shelf, though during aging it remains physically delicate in ways that are easy to forget. Inside a wheel, moisture is moving, structure is settling, and microbial activity is continuing its slow work. Excess handling or repeated vibration can interfere with that quiet development, especially in cheeses that are fragile, soft, or full of openings where internal balance matters. This is one reason aging spaces are often treated with such care. They are not simply storage rooms. They are environments meant to protect slow transformation from unnecessary disturbance. The idea that silence could matter to cheese feels almost poetic, yet it has a practical side. Stillness supports stability. A cheese left in peace can mature more evenly than one constantly jostled by traffic, machinery, or rough movement. In that sense, aging is not only about temperature and humidity. It is also about calm. Some foods ask to be made. Cheese also asks to be left undisturbed. A perfect cheese board can reveal geography, biology, and history together. At first glance, a cheese board may look like a simple arrangement of wedges and rounds. Look closer, and it becomes something far richer. Each piece may represent a different landscape, from high pasture to damp cave country to windswept coast. Each one is also biological, shaped by animal milk, microbial life, and the slow work of enzymes and aging. Then history enters, because every cheese carries a method inherited, adapted, protected, or reinvented across generations. Put several together, and the board becomes more than a meal. It becomes a compact lesson in how humans have worked with land, animals, and invisible life to create astonishing variety from one fundamental ingredient. That is what makes a great selection so satisfying. It offers contrast, though also connection. You can move from region to region, from style to style, while sensing the deeper thread that links them. A board well chosen is not random abundance. It is edible understanding arranged on a plate. Cheesemakers balance art and science with every single batch. No matter how traditional or modern the setting, cheesemaking always lives at that meeting point. Science explains the behavior of proteins, fats, acids, microbes, salt, and temperature. It helps makers understand why a curd firms, why a rind blooms, and why one batch may drift from the expected path. Yet science alone does not complete the job. Art enters in the reading of milk, the feel of the curd, the decision to wait or act, and the judgment that something is ready even before any instrument confirms it. A great cheesemaker does not choose between intuition and knowledge. They use both at once. That is why the craft remains so compelling. It is precise without becoming mechanical. It is expressive without becoming careless. Each batch asks for observation, memory, adjustment, and trust. The result is never only chemistry and never only instinct. Cheese comes alive where measurement and experience learn how to work together. The strangest cheeses often begin as practical solutions to local problems. What seems odd from the outside often made perfect sense where it began. A cheese may look extreme, pungent, unusually shaped, or built around methods that surprise modern eaters, yet those features often grew from real needs. Perhaps a region had harsh winters, scarce fuel, difficult transport, or milk from animals unfamiliar elsewhere. Perhaps people needed a way to preserve nutrients, use every byproduct, keep insects away, or age cheese in the only conditions available. Over time, a practical adaptation could become tradition, then identity, then a flavor outsiders called strange. That journey is one of the most fascinating things about cheese. It shows how ingenuity can harden into heritage. A local solution becomes a cultural treasure. The very traits that once answered necessity may later seem exotic or daring to people who no longer face the same constraints. So the strangest cheeses are rarely random. They are logic made local, then carried forward long enough to become legend. Cheese may be one of humanity's most delicious scientific inventions. That does not mean people needed laboratories to create it. The science came first in practice, long before it was named in books. Humans learned to observe milk, guide fermentation, manage enzymes, control moisture, invite helpful microbes, and shape aging environments with astonishing skill. They were doing biochemistry by touch, smell, memory, and repetition. Over centuries, that practical knowledge produced one of the most varied foods on Earth. Cheese can be fresh or ancient, delicate or forceful, spoonable or crystalline, comforting or challenging. Few inventions combine necessity, curiosity, and pleasure so completely. It began as a way to rescue milk from time, then turned into a whole universe of flavor built on living processes. That is what makes cheese feel so remarkable at the end of this journey. It is not only food. It is an enduring collaboration between humans and nature, refined over thousands of years into something both intelligent and irresistible. As we come to the end of our journey, you might notice how something as simple as milk has unfolded into a world far more intricate than it first appeared. From ancient tombs to mountain caves, from quiet cellars to bustling markets, cheese has carried stories of time, place, and human curiosity across centuries. We have wandered through transformations shaped by unseen life, by careful hands, and by patience measured not in minutes, but in months and years. We have glimpsed how landscapes can echo in flavor, how tiny changes can ripple into something entirely new, and how even the smallest details can shape what eventually reaches the plate. Now, there is nothing more you need to hold on to. Let those ideas drift softly away, like a wheel resting in a cool, quiet room. Let your thoughts slow, as if time itself has stretched out gently. There is no need to follow every detail anymore. Just allow the sense of it all to settle, warm and steady. If you have enjoyed this journey, you might consider subscribing or leaving a quiet thought below. And if you find yourself still awake, there will be another gentle story waiting for you on the screen. But for now, simply rest. Let your breathing soften. Let your body grow still. And as everything around you fades into calm, allow yourself to follow it, slowly and comfortably, into sleep. Sleep well, and good night.